So I thank you for joining me for this exploration, a restitutive commitment to community and to the natural environment through storying and natural history collections. I'm an archival artist and community poet through my research and creative Black feminist practice. In 2024, my National Trust Changing Chalk funding enabled me to pilot the project From Collections to Connections, FCTC. This was designed as a natural history, environment and community connecting initiative with and for groups representing young people and families of our Black, Asian, dual heritage, global majority and minoritised communities. Only a decolonising approach to natural history collections would allow this. And only then, some, if not all, of the academics and museum staff I encountered. You only need one or two to be able to see things in these new perspectives. To allow a poetic and relational investigation into the stories and restorying inspired by natural history collections. And all of this in relation to the South Downs and in collaboration with the Booth Museum and the communities which live in close proximity to the area. How can such an interdisciplinary project connect people equitably and initiate new creative responses to histories, practices, research, and project development across the disciplines and sectors engaged? Where do you begin when you hold closest to you the themes and practice of historiography, social justice, restitution, and decolonising? When you're not attempting to fill a research gap, or raise awareness, or tease out the hardest to reach, or keep score of the numbers through the door, or write an enticing copy for funding bids, or limit your parameters, though you will navigate these. This is an invitation to examine how we draw together our commitments to community and to the natural environment through expanded perspectives about natural history collections and the stories they tell. It is an invitation to funders, grant makers, institutions and academics to extend long-term offers of collaboration and support because there are new connections and intergenerational stories to be inspired. At a time when we are asking how we make our beautiful and sometimes disturbing and tragic collections relevant to society. How do we tell stories more fully and more deeply? What can these tell us about our love of nature, its decimation and exploitation, and the fundamental ways we as a species are connected to the community of life and still yearning to understand that connection even as we erase it? From collections to connections called on me to explore how to value context, evidence, and lived expression equally. To recognize that where language and categorization fail us in our understanding, that walking among the living descendants of those lifeless in museum collections puts breath into our lungs and allows the meaning of collections to be removed from their isolation and remade through community, historical, creative, Indigenous and ancestral curiosity. It has lent into the work of other researchers, creatives, museums, herbariums, and archives. It has aspired to seed into organisational and intergenerational relationships that might lay paths to positive changes in our approaches to collections research, knowledge, and lasting legacies. It opens on my archival art and writing practice, leading to this A Changing Chalk project, a personal invitation to those too often marginalised historically and institutionally, too often made invisible, an invitation to find a full and warming welcome among the wider histories of flora and fauna, among the walking of hillsides and histories waiting to be told through museum collections, an invitation to rest in nature, to come in and come round, come here, come alive, let nerves connect, let your heart skip a beat, feel each moment with the wondrous rays of the sun or the mist on your cheek, to be more than numbers counted and representation, to be more than photos and outputs reported. An invitation without uncertainty and without discrimination, turning you back along the path. Begin with collections encased just along the Dyke Museum, just along the Dyke Road, Brighton. 1 million or more specimens of the Booth Museum call out, each with their own tales of life and loss to tell. Though time and reconfiguration have smoothed out those sharp colonial edges, we'll take up these precious months and set our senses free to grieve what has been lost, to knit together the tapestry of these stories and to find our names from near and far away along the routes we wander. Turn a corner to where birds hide in cupboards and eggs nest in drawers. Everything is here in awe and desolation, the faces of wildness, the bones of dinosaurs crammed together in silent spectacle. Who ever made sense in the hallowed halls where scientists, scholars and ornithologists debated obsessions filled with global colour, but rarely the wisdom of life on Earth? And yet, to get so close up to feathers and skin and every manner of precious thing brings more to the surface than mere wondering. The questions asked of dedicated experts, what of Linnaean categorization? A name for everything? What of the healing properties of plants known so long before Culpeper wrote them down? What of atomic elements of ecosystems that collapse the more we investigate and extract? Is it ever too late to be still, to be simple, to be quiet? Look back with fascination to 1874, the Booth Museum, opened by naturalist and collector Edward Thomas Booth, he himself with stories of travel and wives and epilepsy, left us more than clues to his imagination, even as a working class and indigenous people at his right hand were uncredited, even as artifacts and specimens were stolen away from their home countries, and with them the souls of nations trampled, while others glowed in glory. So much to find and marvel as you turn each museum corner without always knowing why you stare or why it's here. Perhaps it's hearts and histories and heritage that draw us in, perhaps the hint and tint of 400 million years or more of life on Earth in a fossil case, or a solitary woman's daybook reminding us it was penetrating roots of trees and other rooted life just 40 million years ago, poured oxygen up and out, cracked solid soil, trickled phosphorus on its course with nutrients heading for the sea, bloomed ocean algae, smothered our close aquatic families, unprepared us for the sadness that is life and loss again. Still a dried and shriveled stem holds a memory of horseshoe vetch, the glow of its yellow flowering scattered where the thinned chalk grassland sites remain, and the glorious round-headed rampion whispers a promise of the pride of Sussex. Rarer now than 100 years ago, the bee orchid pines for habitats destroyed and begs not to pick me or mow me down before I can set seed. No mention, as I browse the pages of a catalogue stamped with the old Brighton coat of arms, slide back into the Regency of Victorian boots of a man of indigenous means and remark on how his love of nature stole away his gentleness and encased it in collections. Look closely, though. Remarkable. Elegant great-crested grebe with decorative flair, tell your story, almost hunted to extinction for your precious plumes, clumsy on land, wobbling on unmatched mating dance, then gliding by in care of your young, sometimes resting on your back. In a booth case almost too high, you'll see the white-tailed eagles perched, but George, the volunteer at RSPB Pulborough Brooks, has seen it fly and draw him off across a cloudless sky to the Isle of Wight, having fed its full-on goose. Then turn again and let fly. This box is shallow, I look inside. 100 meadow brown butterflies pinned appear alive. But my warm breath upon their wings frees Maniola duotina from their delicate pins, and they rush up to swirl about above and round, an orange haze, a dusk of sound, drawn off to where the light comes in down the stairwell, passing rare and precious specimens, then out through a keyhole I have imagined broad and long, back to ride the warming breeze of the South Downs chalk grasslands where they belong. Kew's herbarium stepped up when Booth specimens could not be found. Such steadfast 19th century work focused on colonial wealth amassed through trade and agricultural plants that seeded the British Empire. Kew so much more now than an opulent, regal garden holding histories of an 18th century palace. And so too our friends at the Linnaean Society, keepers of papers of scientific botany, attempting to universalize all that could be understood as life, as if. Now, with a promise, new legacies through our curious plant taxonomy, in love letters to bee orchids and butterflies settled on Salad Burnet. Still, the knowledge finds a way to travel the eddies of time and reseed our imaginations as folklore. Will you wait a little here to read, to learn? Then together we'll create new trails to follow, with treasure in a box full of birdsong. There is birdsong on video normally. And each poetic line will lead from stone hatch to kestrel, from peeweets to ravens, from ringdoves to wood pigeons and tiny linnets. Once up on these, our South Downs, will we find them again among the richly biodiverse chalk grasslands, the thin, threatened threads of ecosystems that once blanketed these hills? So we follow and follow on with their stories of deep roots and entanglements. And we share what we find, and we find more when we share. Turn the page, turn the page. Let bumblebees, butterflies, and beetles creep in. Let the shapes of birds soothe and sharpen histories that migrate all the way from the domination of the land to the observant certainty of a young illustrator's hand. From a shape to a sheet, let each one teach one. And all their excellence growing in our minds reminds us we are here. And what is here now pins to us in celebration, a gift that folds and unfolds in our hands. Even when we know the odds are stacked unevenly, when melanin alone might push you out of sight. Which way to go? Lean into a wind that blows too cold? Step over a stile to promise the promise of a landscape wide and open and maybe safe? Tread lightly on your way and return another and another day? Scatter our words across the panoramas and hear them rolling back across the hills to where we stand. Let community follow the trail and lay paths across Mill Hill, Truley Hill, Waterhall and Devil's Dyke. Some of us born nearby, others months or years or decades in Sussex, or newly arriving with families and melanin in tow. Then taking a first fearful step, then striding out. Where walking leads, where community succeeds. Like a meadow in full bloom, looking here, looking there, stilled and restored on the hilltops, rolling down from weathered land to a churning channel and the stories of the seas. The finding of others, sisters with brothers, fathers with mothers, the lonely, the young, the lost, and the taken. Here, something tiny fills the imagination, sits us down and sets our hands in motion. Words flock in and draw together to retell what we have found and recall us to belong. More still from each kind soul not so far off, who brings us global stories from a seed bank, so together we might relearn the truths of sacred conservation and Indigenous restoration. Then home again to Shoreham for talks and tea and revelations. From pews to poetry, from pictures to possibilities. And on to an inquisitive heritage days at Saddlescombe's fields and barns, 1,000 years of farming and farms, the Saxon spirits listening closely to what we've learnt, like the children who can't help but draw near. Then to the bird-filled trees, papered to the Brighton Pavilion room, where we'll question the next chapter that is to come and the gathering up of all we've done. That leads us back to the booth where we started with another story to tell of once upon a butterfly tiger that rose from collections and through connections, made connections for you to follow on. Thank you. I will just say that there was bird sound and other sounds but we couldn't do the sound at the same time. So I brought the box that went into the Booth Museum. Inside the box, can you just make it work just for a second? I won't keep you too long. You will find giveaways that were made for this project with details on the back, and the young illustrator who her drawings based on the things we found and the herbariums we visited. You are free to take one or to take one of each, whichever you like. And you'll also find some of the poems if you follow the QR codes. And there's a few of the actual fold-outs that I also created with poems and drawings from the illustrator. And for example, going around the booth trying to find certain birds is difficult, isn't it? So I made a poem map for myself, and then the illustrator created some of the illustrations so the kids and their families could tick them off as they went round. And they spent a lot of time. Thank you.